Welcome back to the Spiritual Word. As always, I apologize for any noises in the background in advance and anything of that nature. And before I start this, I want to start by stating that these are for entertainment purposes only. Always do your own research to come to your own conclusions, to make your own decisions, and I believe in your ability to be your own person. And in today's episode, I have a special guest. This is my friend Evie. And I don't really have like a set topic. Usually I do like I'll have like a not like a script, but I'll have like a key points type of thing that I usually keep in my little book. But today I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna see what happens and see what we talk about.
Okay. Your little book, it didn't show well in the thing because of whatever your background thing is. Yes. Okay. Is that the same little book or is that a different little book?
It's the same one. It still has like a sticker that somebody gave me at Taramandala. They wrote Jackie's awesome on a little thing, and I was like, who wrote that? And nobody knows who wrote that, so there we
Typical
go.
Tara situation. Mysterious. Tantric.
Mysterious indeed. Yeah. So one of the things that I was thinking about before I started on here was just basically talking like we're both spiritual people, or like we both have a spiritual like need within us to like grow and be better all the time. And one of the questions that I came up with was like, what made you want to be a better person?
Wow, that's a really good question.
Thank you.
I think it all started when I got kicked off the plane. In my junior year of college, I had like a terrible drug problem. And I got kicked off a plane, and that's when I knew, like, oh, this is an issue. So I dropped out of college. I went home, and I was hanging out with a friend, and he told me, Evie, you should just clean your room. Like, the state of your room is the chaos in your mind. And I started doing that, and I started just kind of like getting my life in order. And he was kind of coaching me through this. But there was nothing about being a good person. I was just so suicidal that I was like, this was like a little bit of order for the chaos in my mind. And then I did a yoga teacher training. I had like all these omens, and I was like, well, I guess I should do it. And um, in it, it was really the study of yogic philosophy. And when we did the yamas and niyamas, the moral and ethical restraints of yoga, that changed me because nobody had ever given me guidance of like, hey, don't lie. It was like, oh, it's just a white lie. Just tell them that you're sick, tell them whatever. And I really took the training seriously. And like Satya, truthfulness, is one of the yamas. And I was like, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie about anything. Like, if I don't want to hang out because I feel tired, I'm just going to say I feel tired. Or if I don't want to, I'm just going to say that. And how much better my life became living in these ethical ways, how much happier I was, how much more when I was truthful with people outside of myself, I was truthful within myself. So it just made me realize that it's about feeling good, like being a good person. If I'm good to you, that also reflects my relationship with myself. I'm going to be good to myself too. If I'm shit to you, I'm probably being shitty to myself too. So that was how it happened for me. How did it happen for you?
I would say the same thing almost. Well, I was going through a tough time, and also before, I just want to like bounce back and be like, first off, I didn't know that you got kicked off a plane, and second off, I didn't know that you were in like, in I guess like using anything, and I did not like when I first met you, I was like, there's no way you're that type of person, and it's really awesome to see where you came from because I didn't know that, and like that's very very inspirational just to say that. And to answer the question, what kind of started this all for me was I was in a really bad place in my life. I had just gotten out of a relationship where I felt like I was very unappreciated and basically not loved. I was just taken advantage of for the affection and the attention that I would give this person. And
Mm,
I was just really suicidal. Like I had no clarity whatsoever. My life was not really messy, but I felt like every night I had a hard time going to sleep just thinking about like previous mistakes that I had made to build up to that point. And I was like, wow, like I regret all of this shit. And it was just really like really not a good time for me, and I was getting into spirituality just because like it was interesting at the time, but I was also really curious about like what happens after we die, because I was like, what if I just like did it? And I think that that was like the stem point for me. I was like, oh, I just want to know what happens after we're gone.
Wow. And what did you find?
I found a mixture of like you just turn into air, and a mixture of nothing.
Hmm.
And also, I feel like I'm one of those woo type of people who's like, if you believe in heaven strong enough, you'll go to heaven. Or if you believe in hell strong enough, you're gonna go
Mm.
to hell.
Mm.
So you
Wow.
create that afterlife.
That makes sense. I could really, because they say, when people die, like Lama Ziltrim, when she had her near death experience, the Dakinis came to her, and Jewish people have that the one who like puts this on you so that you forget what your life's supposed to be, and that one is the one who heralds you, and like all the different mythologies. And when people have near death experiences, like Christians see Jesus. It's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. That was another thing that I did a lot of research into just because I find it interesting. Like, we don't really know anything, and I find that to be exciting. Like, we don't know anything, so we get to learn everything,
Yeah.
which is really fun to me.
Wow, we don't know anything, so we get to learn everything.
Hmm. So another thing that I wanted to ask was, what was something that stemmed you from like you obviously knew that you wanted to be a therapist, but what did it take for you to realize that?
Oh, Carl Jung.
Who is
Carl
that?
Jung. So Carl Jung, he was like in the first wave of psychology. There have been three. There's depth, then there was behaviorism, and then there's humanism, which is like Carl Rogers, and behaviorism is like B.F. Skinner, Pavlov. And right now we're in humanism. But what happened is there was depth psychology where Freud made this discovery of like putting the unconscious in front of the conscious mind, that we are actually controlled by this unconscious that is this collective psyche that is like archetypally, well, that was kind of Carl Jung who brought that forward, but archetypes have been used since like Plato. But this fabric of reality is basically made by stories, and we live these stories unconsciously. There's always a story, but the issue with Freud is Freud made it all about sex, and Jung was like, okay, yes, there is this drive, but there's many other drives. There's also power drives, there's religious drives, whatever. And Carl Jung said that, like, he was like, oh, I don't want to say this, I don't want to say it like this, but there's no other way to say it. But there's no way for someone to change in therapy without a spiritual revelation. He thought without meeting the unconscious, which he would say the unconscious, I mean, it's basically like God. Without meeting whatever that other force is, a faith in something that you cannot see with your eyes, but you feel and you sense, you can't change. And then behaviorism came along and was like, no, there's nothing inside of us. It's a black box. I can program you to be whatever you want, blah, blah. That failed experiment. And then humanism came along, and I kind of call it like Jungian psychology light, where they make this like this space. There's like three conditions. It's unconditional positive regard, empathetic accuracy, and like I don't know, I forget the three, but it's basically like I'm going to listen to you and make you feel 100% heard. And in that, you will feel like you're loved unconditionally, like you can just be yourself. So you can just say whatever and you will be seen and accepted. And then self psychology really shows like that kind of like combines the two, because it shows that if people are just heard in their true experience, this is like oxygen for our psyche. And so many of us, I think, grow up and we aren't heard. Like people put what they want us to, feel or think or anything. And like if we're having an emotion, maybe our caregiver takes us personally, like it's them, and so then we're not allowed to have our own emotions. So it's all just about like giving the psyche oxygen. But anyway, yeah, so I got into psychology because I thought that Carl Jung's work with mythology was really interesting. I was always really interested in stories and the way that he brings stories, we live stories, like literally being the fabric of reality. I was so fascinated by.
That's really, really interesting. It's also really awesome because one, I didn't know that any of that, and it just made it clicked for me. Like all that really made a lot of sense. So that's really awesome. What was
It,
the sorry, go ahead.
just it goes really well with the Buddhist emptiness because they all say in the end, they're like, we are completely connected to everything outside of us. You know, our cells are just open.
That's very true. In a way, Buddhism talks about those specific topics too, like the four immeasurables and all those other types of like definitions of everything.
It's really so perfect. And you know, Lama Zoltram is like huge Jungian. Carl Jung's mandala is how she found Buddhism.
Oh, I remember reading that in her book. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Psychology is something that's really, really interesting.
Yeah. Too bad that it's so messed up in today's world.
That is very, very true. So, getting more into a personal arena or a personal area, um, what is something that you feel like you've grown because of?
Because of Taramandala.
Because you think Paramandala was something that you grew because of,
What
or
is what is something I've grown because of generally?
yeah,
Everything in my life, every single day, every obstacle, mostly obstacles, you know? Like, have you ever seen the movie The Never Ending Story?
I have not.
It's so good. But in the dragon, there's a lot of great motifs. But there's this dragon, and it's like a dog dragon, and it takes you either 95 or 99% of the way, and you have to do that last 1%. I kind of feel like that's like destiny in a way. And so, just a stupid little example, I didn't count the new year until the new moon, which was yesterday. So, because I was just traveling so much, and one of the things is I wanted to not drink caffeine in the new year. And I was in New York and I got so sick and I couldn't have any caffeine. So I just stopped drinking the caffeine. And it's like this sickness could have been just a horrible thing. You know, I was like, I was in New York, it's cold, it was just so shitty, but it was actually the opportunity on the exact timing where I could finally get over my caffeine addiction, which really bothers me, you know? And I think about the worst thing that's ever happened in my life is definitely like my relationship with my father, because, you know, he has a lot of issues, but learning to love him despite that has given me the ability to love, like, I feel love for almost anyone. Like, someone could tell me something horrible that they did, and I would still feel this like underneath love. And I know that a lot of people think that's BS, and they're like, oh, Christianity, oh, Jesus, whatever. But I didn't know about Christianity or Jesus or whatever before I felt this. I just knew that even though this man like had done these horrible things or whatever, underneath it was just a really hurt child. And so that pain that I had to go through and that hard lesson of him not being able to be in my life gave me the gift of this universal love. So,
That's really powerful.
what about you?
I feel like the same thing, trying to be better every single day. So any opportunity where I feel discomfort, I try to feel into the discomfort rather than to try to run away from the discomfort. And
Mm,
I've kind of realized through going into the discomfort, and I think Paramandala was one of the big things that helped me with this because I didn't understand that I was running away from painful moments or from pain until being there, until experiencing basically Dallas and Anna telling me when I was sick there, like, oh, just like you're only gonna be sick for a little bit. And that really stuck to me. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Maybe I'm gonna enjoy being sick. And I actually like started to enjoy being sick, and it was something that for me was kind of huge. I was like, that's weird, like that's really different. And it might be something that's very surface level. I feel like you have to start somewhere. And from being at that point, I always kind of had this awareness to other people's pain. Basically, I
mm,
feel like I'm very empathic or like I'm very empathetic, and when someone's going through something, I always know, and I don't try to address any problems. Like I won't directly ask the person like, "Oh, are you okay? What's going on?" but I feel like instead just be there in that moment with that person because maybe they don't want to talk about it. And from basically like existing with my family and going to Taramandala and how everything connects with itself, I basically got to this point where I'm like, I chose my family, and if I chose my family, I chose them for some specific reason of myself to grow.
Hmm.
And everybody is in turn like reflections of each other. Like we're made out of the same things, so I can't hate on you if I'm not like willing to hate on myself.
Right.
And
Right.
I've been working on self-love pretty much the past like 3 or 4 years. And because of that, I feel like it's given me a lot of empathy for a lot of other people because I sit back and I was like, wow, I used to make all these decisions that weren't good for me. So I know where you're sitting. You're sitting in a place where you don't know that these are bad decisions until you've done them.
Mm,
And so I kind of cut people slack. I still have, arguments with my parents and I still have arguments with my siblings, but I feel like that's natural and you can't always control your emotions. And I feel like it's a part of myself that I need to express that I didn't get to express as a kid. So
yeah.
all of that, like anger and stuff like that, that comes up for me, I feel like I'm like, okay, I just have to feel it, but not hold on to it and not claim it to be my own. Just feel it and let it go.
I could not agree more. I started like Jungian analysis, where I'm getting analyzed by a Jungian analyst. And it's actually started me, usually I'm just like quiet with my family with issues. And it started me actually being able to start being like, hey, this thing wasn't okay. And, even if the response isn't whatever, to be able to just say it, I feel like is very healing. I feel like in the spiritual community, there can be this thing of like pretending, oh, it's all love and light all the time. And that's just not helpful and that's not real until you're literally Buddha, which I'm sorry, but I haven't met a Buddha, but I met a lot of people that are apparently a Buddha. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, it's part of it.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that it's very important to not let spirituality confuse you and make you think that you need to spiritually bypass all of your problems just to be happy and healthy. Because being
Yeah.
happy and healthy doesn't mean like being perfect 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And I feel
Yeah.
like
Exactly.
people who are this spiritual being who are like, oh, I'm only love and light and blah, 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 they forget the human aspects of themselves. And I feel like that's part of the reason that we're here. We're here to experience this emotion, even if it is uncomfortable.
What you said is just so genius. I just happened to listen to this little thing by Marianne Woodman, who's a very famous Jungian analyst, and she says exactly that. Like people get so lost in the archetype of like spiritual that they forget their human part and they identify with the God. And in that, they don't revere the like God of the spiritual whatever culture. Like some cultures are going to call it Zeus and some cultures are going to call it guru, it doesn't matter. But instead of revering that archetype, that God, that, force, they revere themselves and it's profane. They forget that they're a person.
Mm, yeah.
That's so crazy that you just said that exactly like that. That's so funny.
And it's also really, um, I find I just did an episode like 2 days ago about devotion and what it means to like actually like I like the topic of manifestation because I feel like that's really easy for me. Like I've been able to be like, oh, okay, I want to do this, and then something will happen for that opportunity to present themselves to me. Like I wanted to be at Taramandala for the spiritual community, and that's what I created, right? So in me figuring out how to manifest and all these other things, I was like, I realized that the only way to manifest is through devotion. And devotion is a mixture of love and loyalty. And that's what the Buddhas talk about all the time. They're like, it's your devotion. It's what gets you to enlightenment. Is pure devotion. It's not what you're devoting to. It's what you're doing with that feeling of like you have to love this thing, and that will show up for you.
I need to watch your episode on manifestation because I feel like I have a block, and I feel like a lot of people have a block of just like with devotion, just as much as I like to have devoted my whole entire life to trusting in the things that I can't see, but at the same time, I'm a person of the modern world, and it's like I'm in a material world.
Hmm.
Materialism is the POV. It's not my POV, but it is somewhere because I'm part of this world. I'm part of the collective psyche, and it's so hard. It's so hard to have faith, even when you have, whatever. And maybe that's why Buddhism is all about like those signs or whatever. But I wonder about like manifestation. My block with manifestation is that I'm like, I already have so much. Like, how can I ask for something else? Or, you know what I mean? Or like, what if I ask for something and that's not what's meant for me?
Yeah, I definitely see that. I feel like if you have that, um, I don't want to say need, but if you have that feeling, I feel like it's just your, like, how much of a good person is showing up in you, where you're like, well, I have everything that I want. So why should I ask for more? But wanting to ask for more and the excitement that you get from seeing something that you want is like a part of your, basically like your inner child expressing itself. And it's just another form of expression. And it's not something, I feel like people dim themselves and they're like, well, I shouldn't want all of these things because material isn't the way to enlightenment. Like if I have this thing, it's not going to make me any more or less spiritual. It's not going to make me a better person. It's not going to do any of these things, but it is something that you want. And it is an expression of you, and just like anger or, sadness, it's not something that you should suppress, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it's interesting, even talking about that when I'm saying, like, oh, what if I wished it for this other person? I still feel this just like block on my heart. It's like, I feel like my heart is like, when I think about like asking, like, I can thank God and I can be with God or whatever. But when I think about asking God for something, even if it's not for myself, like, let's say it's totally not even a selfless thing. When I think about asking God for something, my heart is blocked. And I wonder if there is a block in my connection to the divine. You know what I mean? If I'm being a slave rather than a child of God, you know?
Hmm. Interesting. I've never heard that term, like a slave rather than a child. That's a really fascinating thing to say.
I got it from Paramahansa Yogananda, not me.
I think that's a good like point of view to have. But I think something that also helps me is knowing that how do I word this? It's not wrong to want things.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's also your heart like wants to be devoted to this other thing, but I feel like when this thing is trying to give back to you, like whatever you believe in, like if you're like source, emptiness, whatever, that thing is trying to give back to you, and that's what you want.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and that's why it comes up that way. But I feel like the heart blockage, I feel like that's something that maybe might be more personal or relevant to you specifically. Or maybe like as a kid you were told no a lot because, oh well, you already have enough. Like you see these kids, like I remember when I was a kid and my sister would never throw away food. Never. Like my parents never threw away food. And they're like, there's people who are starving and you're here not eating your food. I remember one time, this is a really embarrassing story that all of my family continues to bring up every single time we get together. They're like, remember when you used to never eat and we would like not take you to restaurants and stuff because you would never eat? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, well, remember that one time you forced us to take you to Applebee's and we made you finish your food and then you threw up on your plate? I'm like, yes, I remember that. I'm like, to me, that's traumatizing. Like, yeah, I remember throwing up. It was embarrassing. And I think from that experience, I picked up a lot of like unhealthy eating habits because I was like, well, there's people who are starving, so I can't be ungrateful and not eat my food, not finish my food.
Totally. And also talk about like not listening to your body, eating until you vomit. That's your like you're literally being cut off from your connection to your body.
Mm-hmm. I was literally like gagging with every bite. So talking about not listening to your body, I'm just sitting there like every bite. It was
How
awful.
old are you?
I was like 7, like
Oh
around
my
that. Yeah,
God. I would pay for a video of that though, as morbid as that is.
no videos. Thank goodness. There was a time before cameras. and technology. But they bring that up every time I see
Viral.
it. That probably would have.
Could have been a meme.
It would have been a meme. That'd have been like, you remember this girl? Look at her now. But yeah. What do you think is something that makes you feel like there's a blockage with your manifestations besides like I know that you're explaining it talking about your heart and like how it's blocked, but can you explain that in a different way?
I think I'm gonna have to go to childhood. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because I know, because when we talk, like, it's like the childhood really is like the map of the world. And I remember the first time, like, do you remember the first time you became aware of yourself as an individual?
Hmm. I'm not gonna lie to you, no.
Well, think about it. Maybe because I heard someone say this and then I realized this was mine. So maybe it'll percolate because it took me a while to remember. But I remember because, like, when you're a kid, you actually have no differentiation between your mom and you. You think your mom is you. So until like most people about the age of like 6 or 7, I guess that's not psychological. That's just I don't know the data, but or the anecdotal evidence or whatever. I just know for me, this is when I realized, oh, I'm an individual person. It was like my dad's birthday and he got a video game, which, oh Lord, then he would become addicted to the video game. But I also got like a Barbie like video game to play on it. And I guess that I started crying because I really wanted to play. But it was his birthday and his video game. And I just got so yelled at. I don't remember. I think it was by my dad. And my dad just yelled at me so much that I was such a selfish person for, wanting to play this game on his birthday. And yeah, then I was just always told that I was selfish growing up. So I think that's the block on my heart is this belief that I'm selfish. And so I'm like, well, I can't ask for anything. That would be selfish.
Yeah. I think yeah, that's I was gonna say that maybe you feel selfish for wanting things, but I didn't want to like put that if that wasn't the case. But
But it was intuitively exactly what was up.
yeah, and I think that happens to a lot of people. I feel like that's a really common thing or like a common blockage, especially when it comes to your heart, because if you want something, I feel like it's just who you are and it's not wrong. Just like, how you have compassion for all these other people who have done really wrong, immoral things, but to them, it's not immoral.
Mm, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I feel like it's us not trusting that we're going to get what we deserve or thinking that we deserve less than.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Or we are less than.
Yeah.
And therefore we deserve less than. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that honestly blocked me too for a long time. I was like, why should I do the things that I want to do? Like, for example, this podcast, I held out on doing video versions of this just because I'm like, who's going to find me interesting? Who's going to want
Mm.
to watch all these things? Who's going to want to see my face?
Those frosty tips.
These frosty blonde tips that have worn out. But yeah.
Yeah. But how did you get past it?
I think kind of forcing myself into believing in myself more. And I think it also helps to have people to bounce ideas off of. Like one of the people who really got me to push myself was SJ. And she was like, you need to believe in yourself because I see so much potential in you that all you have to do is believe in yourself and you will unlock that. And I'm like,
Mm.
okay, I'm going to try to believe in myself even more and more. And, for the sake of making my older spiritual sister proud of me and to make myself proud of myself because I want to be this version of myself and not dwell on the fact that I could be that version instead of trying to be that person.
Yeah. It was interesting. I feel like also at Taramandalo, like it was just so obvious how much spiritual like wisdom you had, and you were so much younger. I feel like everyone, but you just had this. You were this like power of spiritual. knowledge in the age didn't matter. You had more wisdom than people that had been studying the stuff their whole entire lives, you know? It was really interesting to watch everybody recognize that, like silently. That was a really cool thing.
That is the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me. And thank you so much. Yeah, I think that was another huge way that I got myself out of thinking that way of myself because everybody there would be like, "Oh, you're so wise," and I've always heard that my whole life, but being around my family kind of put a damper to my own self belief because they're like, "Who are you to think that you're special?" Like I remember I'd go home and my parents would be like, "How do you have friends at school? How do you have, friends like you?" Just kind of kicked me out. I think it's because I don't have like a premium version of this.
Yeah, now it's here.
Yeah, so my fault. I should have upgraded so we can go, longer, but
I was
basically,
wondering, so I saw it running out. I was watching the clock run down. I was like, what's gonna happen?
there's a timer. Where the.
It was like we only have I saw it counting down for like 5 minutes.
Oh, I did not see that. Maybe I have to put my camera on a different side. Yeah. But, anyways, as I was saying before I got cut off, like, I'd come home and one of my siblings, like, she loves to press my buttons. Like, that's like one of her joys in life to piss me off. That's one of, you know, her favorite things to do. And I'd go home and I'd, explode on my family because I'm like, why do you guys do this? Why are you guys so rude? Why are you guys so annoying? Like, why do you enjoy seeing me mad? And they would, kind of bully me in a way and be like, how do you have friends at school? Like, if we're doing this and you can't handle this, I can only imagine what you're like at school. I can only imagine what you're like in public. I can only imagine, like, who would want to be your friend. And that was like a big blockage in myself where I did not believe in myself. That's where I was getting these ideas of like, I'm boring. Who would want to listen to me? Who would want to be around me? Who would actually think these things are true if my whole life these people who have lived with me tell me the opposite?
That's just so crazy because you're like the least boring person that I have ever met. You're so interesting and you're so fun. You have your Leo sun in your like 10th house or something. I don't know. But our moon, Leo moon, I mean, Taurus sun, Leo moon. Wow. That's so crazy. I wonder because like that's just so not applicable to you. You know what I mean? Like it's just not you. And I wonder because in psychology they say there has to be like a hook for a projection. It's so crazy how families do this to each other. Neither of us are like mothers. We don't have children, so we don't know what will come up and what happens. But I just feel like our generation is very different because we talk about this stuff, which generations before never did. We have so much psychological knowledge, and I just wonder, our children will have their own sorts of problems,
Mm,
but it's just so wild to me. Like that just it really boggles my mind.
yeah, definitely. I feel like parents who don't have the spiritual knowledge, I feel like they're doing something right without knowing it because I feel like without those occurrences in my life, I would have not like tried to go for more or be the person I am.
Mhm.
And so I feel like it's not like I'm one of those people who's like, oh, everything happens for a reason, but I feel like that made me who I was.
I mean, everything happens for a reason, or what's the other alternative? Like everything's chaotic and meaningless. Like we come here for no reason. It's like I pragmatically believe that everything happens for a reason because it's so much more empowering. Like I got this shitty hand of fate because I'm supposed to make like a rainbow with it. You know what I mean? I'm supposed to find it's always in the darkest places that we find the most light. Like it's in the worst circumstances that we find the best things. And I don't know, I feel like society, we're really addressing like people that have been victims of like we're addressing our own ancestral trauma in our families and the ancestral trauma happening outside of ourselves, but there's a danger and I think we should be addressing this stuff, but at the same time we're like we love this victim mentality and that's just the worst thing for the individual psyche.
Hmm.
it's a beam that we're walking, I feel like, as a society.
Yeah, definitely. But I also feel like, you know, those victims are gonna put you to work. They're giving you business. And, I feel like
Oh,
it's a yin and yang to things.
yeah.
But, not that I support that way of thinking, but, I feel like everybody's been there at least once in their life.
Been in a victim mentality state.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's when I was so suicidal. I mean, it was just like, why, blah, blah, blah. And it was like I had been the career that I had chosen, I had kind of had it chosen for me at like 10 years old.
Mm,
And I felt like it was my whole identity and this identification with my persona. And and it wasn't like it was like I think when you're doing something that you're not passionate about, it's soul sucking. Like you're here for a reason to do something. So if you're doing the wrong thing, it's literally like taking your soul out until you want to kill yourself. You're like, this is not, let's try again. Like, let's just try again. But to really be able to get out of that persona, it took like the meditation. Meditation is really the big thing on that space near awareness where you can see, is this really working? Is this really what I want to do? You know?
yeah, 100%. And I feel like what you said is like so on the nose, like that's so perfect. I remember going to jobs and everything, and I'm like, I hate it here, and I don't understand how like the rest of you guys don't hate this and don't hate it enough to like quit and like throw a tantrum. Like I hate it. I hate all of it. And then the more like Gen Z came out and was on social media and like talked about their opinions, they're like, I hate it. I hate everything about this. And I'm like, yeah, because robots could easily replace all of us. And these old people just want us to hate our lives as much as they hated their lives. Like, truth be
Yeah.
told, they just want us to
Yeah.
hate everything.
Yeah. They people just really don't understand the youth and what they go through. You know, they're like, "Oh, in your day, I did this, blah blah." Meanwhile, people own homes 10 years later and you have like health insurance, and people used to get rent in LA and New York for like $500. Now it's like, you want to get $500 rent in LA? Okay, well, good luck. Good luck. They used to be able to get that in like a night, you know, it's just I don't know. People don't get it. And I feel like that last generation, like they did let people suck their souls a little bit, like they're so shallow. Like I think about the 80s and the greed is good was like, the obsession with the being, I don't know. But then again, I look at us now and I look at the Kardashians and how many people get the stuff pumped into their faces and get the surgeries to like look. And I'm like, actually, we're just as bad. Maybe. I don't know. Do you think we're just as bad as the 80s?
Yeah, I do because it's like a push and a pull type of thing. I feel like this is also another yin yang thing, and I also believe that history has a way of repeating itself. And I feel like the youth is gonna say, "Well, I know what's best," until they get to our age, and they're like, "Ooh," now they're trying to teach the younger generations, and I feel like that like I'm gonna have boomer mentality when I'm that age. Like I feel like I'm gonna be a boomer and everyone's gonna hate me. So I mean I
We're
can't
gonna
hate them.
be boomers together.
We can be boomers together. At least we're in the same age group.
Yeah, I can't wait to hate on the youth.
I can't wait to be old and be like, look at them. They don't know what it was like. They don't know what we went through. Yeah. And I forgot to ask you another question. Because you were um acting at a really young age, do you think that affected your psyche?
Completely. I think that in a way, I mean, it's all, you can see it in my astrological chart. It's perfect because, in a way, it was good because it gave me such a strong work ethic. Like, I
Mm,
believe children should work just because I had such a good experience working, like making my own money, feeling like I was responsible for myself. And it was like something I liked doing. I also, on top of that, like when I wasn't working, high school, I had a job as a lifeguard, and I don't know, I feel like we infantilize kids a little bit,
mm,
like And then I feel like that's kind of part of this devouring mother archetype of like, you can't walk, you can't do anything on your own because you might get hurt. I want you to be a baby forever. And then people never grow up, you know? So I really liked working. I thought it was really fun. It was a good experience to be around adults, to make my own money, to be responsible, to like have all my lines done, be able to do that. People call that people, especially in psychology, they say that's like parentification or whatever. But I think that's such a Western mindset. Like if you go to other parts of the world, like in Africa, 3-year-olds use knives. Like, it's just like we really extend the youth for a really long time in the West. But on the negative side, like in my astrology chart, you'll see Saturn in my 11th house. So, like my friendships it was really hard in my friendships because I'd be like, oh, I have an audition. And so I would have to cancel my plans. And like, I didn't go to school for most of the time. So everyone was at school hanging out all day long. And I wasn't really in on this stuff. And I always felt like isolated. And then obviously the abuse of like, I wish that I had more protection around like agents and managers being a teenager. And when you're a teenager, you kind of go out and then you spark up, and then you go out and you spark up, and you're really hungry when you're a teenager. You eat so much and you get plumpy. It's part of it. Part of being a teenager, you get plumpy sometimes. And I just had so much pressure on me to be thin at like 14 years old, which
Mm.
was really, really hard on my psyche. But to loop back around to what we talked about before, in the end, I think it really made me that was the beginning of me taking responsibility for myself. Is then when I became older, I was having this weird like food thing, and I was kind of blaming my mom, and I realized, you know, this is my thing. Yeah, it started with you and with the agents and the managers and all this, but now this eating disorder is like an autonomous life in my own body. I can't blame anyone else for it anymore. And having to take the responsibility for that really helped me then go on to take responsibility for more stuff. So, yeah, but there's definitely like I would recommend working as a child. I would not recommend being a professional actor.
Did it ever like occur to you that you had fans and stuff? Like, how was that?
Well, there wasn't really the internet at that time so much. You know what I mean? Like I had a website or whatever, and I would get recognized in public, which I thought was kind of cool when things would come out. But I remember the first time I went to like film a movie where I was like a lead. I was in the 6th grade, and I came home and I was walking through my middle school, and I was like, nobody really noticed me, nobody had a crush on me. I was no one. And suddenly I'm walking through my 3,000 school, and it's like, to me, it was like hundreds of people around me. It was probably like, like it was probably like 12 or like 50 or like 40, but it was just like herds of people around me asking me, where were you, blah, blah, blah. And it was so horrifying um, that I was like, I never, ever, ever, ever want this to happen again. And then in high school, when it would happen to me at school, people would be like, hey, I think I saw someone that looked like you on TV. I'd be like, I have no idea. It must be my doppelganger. I never had any interest in that whatsoever. And that was a big part of me leaving is I did like acting, but I was like, what's the end goal? And I feel like if I was recognized, if I actually had a passion for acting, it would be different. Like now, if somebody was like, hey, Evie, like I've heard your astrology stuff, that's really cool. Or if I was like, if I did like wrote a book on psychology and people thought that was interesting and they were a fan of me because of that, that I think I would be proud of. But the acting stuff, I just don't know if it was ever really me.
Mm.
So it's shameful, kind of.
Oh well, damn. Well, I always thought that being a child actor or like growing up from your youthful moments and having fame or having like I guess a name would be very tolling on your mental health. Like I feel like that was always something that I kind of like naturally got to just from watching people struggle. Like if you watch like one of the big huge people who grew up around our similar time frame was Justin Bieber, and I remember hating him because of who he was and how like he thought he was like this fuck boy and like he would, you know, cultural appropriate certain things, and he wasn't even from America, and he was over here, acting like somebody who he's not. And then he came out with a later album talking about how fame really messed him up, and he wasn't ready for all these people to switch up and all of a sudden love him. And I think that's really interesting that, like, when you're not somebody who has like a big name in something, people hardly look at you, you know?
Hmm.
And so you kind of already know the truth of the circumstances and like the situation. And then when you are in a spot where you're in the spotlight, and then all of a sudden everybody's like, oh my gosh, I didn't notice you, but now I notice you. But the only reason I notice you is because of this. And I
Yeah.
think I can see how that feels shameful just because you're like, well, you don't know me because of who I am. You know me because of what social media is telling you to be or to achieve or what you want in your life, but you don't even know what you want in your life.
Dude, I think you should study psychology.
I was thinking about it. I was like, maybe I should go to school and be a therapist. And then I was like, but that's so long. That's gonna take so long. Like, I
It
can't.
does take it does take so long, but there's a lot of like uses to psychology. Just like reading Carl Jung, I feel like you already like would intuitively know it, and he would just give you like validation for what you already know, because I feel like you asked about fans and about the relationships, and I feel like um the psyche is just all relationships. Like our relationships are everything to our psyche. There was this Harvard grant study where they studied 500 Harvard graduates from ages 19 to 90, and they found
Wow.
that the only thing that really matters in life are relationships. And just like you said in your example, I think that's what fame really takes away. Like, and my experience of being like, whoa, in middle school, all of a sudden, it's like fame takes away authentic relationships, and then you just are so lost. You don't know who you are. It's such a terrible toll, and we all think that we want that. Oh, I can have whoever I want, and you can probably do that, and I can be friends with whoever I want, but none of it is actually real.
Hmm. In the fabrication, I feel like that's where you're like, it doesn't feel good anymore.
No, it feels and authentic, and I feel like we unconsciously, it's like our unconscious or intuitive, our spiritual part of ourself always knows the truth. Like I feel like if I were to say something bad about you, Jackie, to someone, I feel like you, even though you would never know, some part of you would feel it somewhere. Like
Mm,
you can't talk bad about people behind their back because we are connected. Like ourselves, we've already spent so much time together, like the quantum physics of our cells, they're already connected. So if we are in tune and I said something bad about you to, I don't know, my friend, I feel like somewhere you would know, and when somebody's being friends with you for the wrong reasons, you feel it everywhere. It's so strong.
yes, 100%. That is the most, like, it resonates with me really, really hard. And I feel like that's just truth. Like, I feel like people who, like, let's say you hang around with some random person at your school and you can feel that, like, you're like, I feel like this person doesn't like me. Like, I feel like she's just friends with me because I don't know why she's friends with me, but I can't explain why. And I feel like that why, or that middle ground, or that gray area is gray because there's a part of them that's like, I'm just here. Like, maybe they don't want to be friends with you and they're just friends with you because they're lonely or something.
Completely, completely. But then it gets into, and then this is why it's so hard to like listen to the intuition. Well, but then you always have to ask yourself, like, well, is it really me that doesn't want to be friends with that person? And then I'm just projecting it onto them. But then once you ask yourself that question, I think you figure it out pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also like sometimes you don't want surface level relationships, and I feel like that's something that's pushed on us heavily. Like, everyone's like, "Oh, you should just be friends with people who help you like not feel reality, or you should be friends with people who help you escape." Like, when I don't think people consciously recognize that they're saying, "Oh, go make friends to escape reality." But when like people like my mom tell me, "Oh, you should go out, you should, go to a party, or you should go to a bar with your friends, or why don't you go to the club anymore?" And I'm like, That's such a weird thing for you to push on me. That's so weird. Like, I don't want to do that. That's not where my excitement is anymore. That's not who I am. So it's not the fun that I'm craving.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But it's like our culture, I feel like we're like the Roman hedonists, you know? We are totally hedonistic and we just like the culture just pushes us to chase our pleasure because they can sell us pleasure. And it's just such like when we were talking earlier about our parents not having like spiritual values, I feel like that's my issue with the 80s. It's like literally the song I'm a material girl, you know, and not that we're not bad about that, especially with Instagram and ads. No, I want this new makeup thing. That's me. I'm like, I want this thing, I want that thing, you know, and it's like you know, but at least we know that our values are not like material like that. You know what I mean? About pleasure and whatever. I have so many friends that don't drink and it's so weird. I don't drink. Except for this weekend I did.
Except for
And
this
I had
weekend.
but it sucked. When I drank, I got like 3 hours of sleep. I got sick. It was so shitty. Like it's just so bad. But we just normalize these like pleasure pursuits that leave us feeling more empty than when we began.
Yeah. If this was a poetry slam, I would have snapped. Silent clap, because that was like right on everything. Like that, I feel like that's why people pursue careers that don't really fulfill them. Because they're like,
Mm,
well, this is what people tell me I want, this is what society tells me I want. And, to be successful in everybody else's mind, I have to have money. And I have to have the nice house and the perfect wife or the perfect husband and, raise the perfect kids and make sure that they go to college and that they continue my legacy. And everything is, in a way, it's like selfish.
yeah. 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 And I like what you said. It's like it's all selfish. And at the same time, it is because that's what everybody else says. They're working with the consensus. So they're listening to everyone else, and yet it's selfish at the same time. It's like all of the things are inverse. You know, you should be doing it for yourself, but selflessly. It's completely inverse.
Like that's one of the things that kind of strikes me about the career that you chose and why you chose to go to Tarmandala and like how you continuously try to do better. And that's one of the things that like really sticks out to me is just that part of like you're doing this for a reason that helps you, right? Because you experience what it's like to have a therapist who's not really a good therapist, but that has like sparked something in you where you're like, okay, I want to pursue this so that people don't have to go through what I went through. And in turn, when you get to that point where you are the therapist, people are going to be really grateful and you're actually doing a service. Something that I heard on, I watched this dude named Bashar who's like a channel for this alien thing because I'm weird like that. And one of the things that he said is that you should be doing the thing that you want to do because that's your job in this life, like in the rope of this reality, in the fabric of this reality. Your wants, your dreams, your desires are who you're meant to be for your service to the world. And I feel like that's you know where you fit, even though you're not really conscious of like why you know where you fit.
Yeah. I feel like I was saying this to someone else. I feel like we all have somewhere that we fit. Like we all have who was it? Oh yeah. I was like, I think we all have stuff that we're like natural, like we have a natural aptitude for it. We're naturally passionate about it. We get in a flow and we do it. But we all just have to find what that is. And I feel like if we find it, the universe will open the gates. If we really find that thing that we're supposed to be doing and we pursue it for the right reasons, um, the universe will open the gates. But I think so many people can't find that. But I
Mm,
do think everybody has it.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, I do think everybody has it as well.
We should do an episode of that. Like how do people find this? Because I would like to send this to someone very specific where I'm like, you're such a talented, smart person, but completely unable to find like what drives them. And I don't know if there's a block because, well, this isn't what the family says is
Mm.
valuable, or this isn't, what society says is valuable. Oh, to be a yoga teacher, I think that's really what they're supposed to do. Um, but it's like they're like, for some reason, they're not finding this valuable. I'm like, yoga teachers have been the biggest changers of my life and many people I know, but it's because they don't make very much money and,
Mm.
which is a real thing.
Yeah, that's very true. But you can also do ways of like, you know how in the retreats they have the ability to donate if they want to donate? They could do that, stuff like that. I feel like another reason why people don't go after their goals or their dreams or their ambitions or like their natural talents is because of money. Like a lot of the time, I feel like it's because money is something that you need to have and you need it. Like society's like,
Yeah.
oh, if you don't have this, you're just gonna be a homeless bum. Like that's it. Your life is over. And it's not just that. It's like you have to be creative, and when you really want something, that creativity will come out of you.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
one of the things that I was thinking about, I was like, I can't go to school because I don't have money. And then I'm like, well, I could take out loans, but that's not something that I want to do. Or I can start like a GoFundMe that, telling people, well, I just want to do this thing and maybe it doesn't work out. But as long as I'm trying to do something, more ideas will come from that. Like if I do something and
Yes.
it fails, then I can think of something else.
Completely. And I think that people are too scared because to really like do that, whatever way that you pursue, you're going to have to put yourself out there.
Hmm.
And I don't think that people want to put themselves out there and to really be like, this is what I want because of, again, it probably goes back to childhood. But then, with the childhood thing, I'm also like, that was also a memory that they grabbed onto because something in their psyche, is probably, I don't know. I just think it's many things. So I hate to just be like, oh, childhood, but also childhood.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of like all these instilled beliefs that they've taken on to be their own identity.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And this is something I've learned in psychology is that we like our personality is like basically our beliefs, our traumas, our greatness, like, but our soul is completely, and I feel like we spend so much time developing the personality, like how am I going to be liked by you? And at Tara Mandala it was the opposite. We developed soul. Like how do I sink in to this? How do I sink into soul and truth? Which kind of like you got to let part of the personality kind of fall away because I'm not going to entertain you. If I'm connected to my soul, I'm not going to put on that personality to like make you comfortable anymore because it's not my job.
Hmm. Yeah, that was something that really, really touched my soul because that's the same thing. Like, I feel like that's what you do when you want to make other people proud or you want to do something for the sake of another person or society.
Yeah,
You make up
completely.
this personality of someone you think will be this ideal person or like who people will be, envious of or proud of or who people will look up to or people who will look, despise you and want to be you. And whatever the case is, like, it's not really who you want to be. It's not your authentic self.
No, no, not at all. Not at all. But, and it's miserable, it's miserable to live in having to be like the entertaining big, like it's tiring, and then it's like people are loving you for this persona which isn't even really you. Like who are you at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday when you're tired and you're on a couch? I don't know, it's break, I don't know, you don't have work for some reason, who is even just sitting on the couch, and can you be that with your friends, or do you have to constantly be like entertaining them and do, I don't know.
Mm, yeah, that's true. One of the tips that I used to put on my TikTok, like how to be your authentic self, I always do like how to's because I feel like they're more clear. And because
Yeah.
I talk in like a circle, right? So it's always everywhere until it gets to a point. But I always talk about how to be your authentic self is just like think about who you are in the shower. Do you sing in the shower? Is that where you find you're actually just this fun personality? Or do you make up this fun personality to enjoy the time of solitude? Or are
Mhm.
you this person because, people sing in the shower so you think it's something cool to do?
Wow, that's so interesting. And, it depends on the day. Sometimes you want to sing in the shower, sometimes you want to cry in the shower, sometimes you want to lay down, sometimes you want to dance.
Exactly. And I think it's also vulnerability. Like, how vulnerable are you willing, or how willing are you to be vulnerable? And how
Yeah,
much does it scare you?
that is a question that I wonder. A lot to learn on that front. I feel like I have a very easy time being vulnerable. Doesn't freak me out at all. But a lot of people have a lot of trouble with this. And I feel like it's a huge block.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Because if I can't be vulnerable with you, I can be vulnerable with myself
Exactly.
and be vulnerable in the shower.
Hmm. You know how there's a lot of people who are getting like, I don't know if this is something that you've seen, but I've seen a lot of people who are in their like early 20s getting diagnosed with autism, and they never knew that they were autistic and stuff like that. They would have problems stimming at home because of masking for so long.
Mm,
And I'm like,
mm.
that's society.
So they would have problems. They would just be only stimming at home and it would just be way too much because they couldn't when they were out in the world, you're saying?
No, like they couldn't stim at all. They couldn't find anything that would, like, they would be ashamed to stim, even in the, closed doors.
Don't even get me started about this because the autism situation and psychology, the same person that came up with, there's only one funded therapy for autism. It's called ABA therapy, and they don't let people stim, but they call it something else. I worked as an ABA therapist for 2 weeks, and that was like, this is child abuse, and it's behaviorist. It's by like Lovov, I forget his name, but he's the same person that came up with gay conversion therapy. It's the same root, ABA therapy. And it's this normalization that we all need to be exactly the same and look exactly the same. And it is the only thing funded by insurance companies. And it is child abuse. Like, I had a child and they were crying, and I told them to get up, and then they start crying. And by the therapy, I'm not supposed to even acknowledge their crying until they get up. So, not this child was 3. 3. And you're training a population that is more likely to be abused physically, mentally, sexually, all the ways, to just comply with authority, to root out their individuality, because behaviorism is like, I can train you to be completely normal. And that's what we want everyone to be exactly the same. And it's like, it's such child abuse. And it is like, it's really sad because I posted a video about it, and my like goddad, who's gay, his daughter, and if she had watched the video, like defriended me on Facebook because it turns out she's an ABA therapist. but it's so pronounced. Like, if you're a psychology grad and you want a job out of graduating, that's the job you get. Like, everybody gets that job, and you just are like total abuse. And I meet people that are like nice. Even when I was working at the job, I was like, hey, you guys, don't you think this is kind of like abuse? And they were like, actually, yeah, kind of. And people just don't think. They don't think. I'm like, you don't treat a child this way, but they treat it so different because, oh, it has autism. And I got in a fight with the mom of the child, and I was like, I'm just playing with them like kids. They're like, well, they're not a regular kid. They have autism. I'm like, they are a regular kid. God, it's
Oh,
just really,
yeah,
yeah, psychology really, really, really has problems with the autism. And and the ABA therapists, they don't let you STEM. Even though they say that they do, they don't. It's really messed up.
that's the truth. You heard it here first. I'm gonna put that. That's gonna be my clickbait. ABA, child abuse.
You'll get some dislikes because there are people that are like, there's a lot of people invested in it. And actually, yeah, and if you go to any like USC, UCLA, like any kind of grad program for psychology, they're going to teach you that. And that was actually my first round of applications to grad school. I wrote about how that was child abuse, and I got rejected from schools that I should not have been rejected from. But I found out later from one of my professors that the like department has to approve you for including the department that teaches ABA therapy.
Oh,
But it was less because then I found the depth psychology school that I go to. So it's like one of those things like hard lesson. And then boom, like I found the school I'm supposed to be in that lights my soul up. Um, but yeah, it's like it's everywhere in psychology. It is taught at every major school. It is really messed up.
yeah, that sounds exactly like child abuse. Although they'd never probably wouldn't admit it. And I think it also has a lot to do with like money. Like they put
It's
a lot
all
of money,
money.
so wherever my money's going, it has to be a good place because I'm giving them money. So don't talk bad about them.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's like empirically validated, but it's like, yeah, if I tell a kid to do this, like, yeah, the behaviors that are like problematic are going to improve in the next like 3 months. But then think about 10 years down the line. Like you're working with a kid. You're not just working with 5 months, you're working with long term. There's not long term studies for this.
Mm,
And people now are reaching out and being like, ABA therapy was one of the most horrible things, but you're exactly right. It is what is funded by insurance, and so it lives.
mm.
Onto your podcast. I think the absolute world of you. I think you have just so much wisdom. I don't know where it comes from. And it's not just me, it's like so obvious. And so thank you for having me. It really means the world to me. So thank you.
Thank you for accepting my invitation and making time because I know you're going to school and you got all these things going on.
Jackie, call me anytime, but not too much, as we talked about before.
You're like, I'm busy, but not that busy. Right? You're right. Gotta have
Also, this
moderation.
this was just a really fun, this was just a really enjoyable conversation. As all conversations, like anybody watching this is just conversations with Jackie 24/7. But actually, if you know her in person, she actually gets deeper and more in the mud.
Yes, exactly. I like to get deep, and we don't have enough time for that. So, before I end this, I also want to state that if anybody who's watching this is interested in spirituality, psychology, or science and self help, because obviously I'm not a therapist, I'm not licensed, but if you're into self help, then I recommend subbing or following if that's something that you're interested in. And, thank you, Evie, for being my guest. I appreciate you. And thanks for existing because your existence is vital.
Thank you, Jackie. I love you dearly.
I love you too.
And namaste to anybody watching. And God, now I'm slipping my words. It's getting all nervous. Yes, it's all good.
Thanks for coming on, and also Happy New Year, since I know that you just celebrated it.
Yes, I did just celebrate it, and it's going good. Thank you.
Mhm. Well, thank you, and I don't know when I'll call you next, but it's been fun catching up.
Thank you. And Happy New Year to you. And also, it's the year of the dragon. And I feel like that just really fits you.
Thanks. I'm actually a goat, I think, or a bunny. I think I'm a rabbit.
Oh my God. That's two different animals. I don't know. I could see goat or bunny. I could see goat more, honestly.
I don't know what the goat has trait wise.
The climb things, right?
Oh,
Climber.
well, that makes sense. Yeah, I can see that. That's awesome. Okay, I'll see you.
Okay, bye, Jackie. Love you, love
Bye.
you.
Love you.